Now, in these questions, sometimes we just solve them with guessing and checking, and sometimes we need to solve them algebraically. Question A would be one on a quiz or a test that I would add the word algebraically because I would like you to know how to use the formula and how to solve it. So question number one, NP2, or part A, NP2 is 56. The NP2, you'd go to your formula sheet and you'd see this on your formula sheet, so you have to translate this. This means n factorial over n minus 2 factorial. And so the question is, how do I solve an equation for n if there's factorial signs? How do I simplify an equation if there's factorial signs? Well, simplifying an equation when there's factorial signs is really easy, and it's based on the definition of what a factorial is. If I asked you, what is 100 factorial over 98 factorial? Well, you wouldn't in your head do 100 times 99 times 98 times 95 times 96 times 95. You wouldn't do that in your head because it would be way too big of a number. Even if you try to type that into your calculator, it's too big of a number. But if you use the definition and you think, which number is bigger, 100 or 98? 100 is bigger. You could start saying, well, 100 factorial would be 100 times 99, and then when you get to 98, you say, well, I'm just going to put an exclamation mark there, because it does keep on going, but this would allow me to cancel out the top and the bottom. And the answer would just be 100 times 99, or 9,900, and you would be done. The same thing happens when you have variables. You have to decide which is bigger, n or n minus 2. And if you're unsure, put a number in for n, like 10. This would be 10, this would be 10 minus 2, this would be 8. Obviously, the top is bigger. So we use the definition of a factorial and start expanding the top. This would be n times by, and then you would do 1 less, which is n minus 1. And then you would do 1 less, and you keep going until you get what's on the bottom. And you would say, well, I could keep going, but I'm just going to put an exclamation mark with that one, that it keeps on going. This would simplify. And now we have changed our equation to no longer having factorials. In fact, if I distribute the n, I have n squared minus n equals 56. It's a quadratic. You can make one side equal to 0. And factor. And you get two answers for n. N could be 8, or n could be negative 7. Now, based on the original question, our factorials only work for positive numbers and 0, so you'd have to cancel out negative 7, because you can't do a negative number factorial. So the only answer is n is equal to 8. This is what it means to solve it algebraically. Algebraically would be using your formula, showing that you know how to simplify factorials by expanding the bigger one until you get to the smaller one, in which case they simplify away. And you needed to use factor it and so on. If you were allowed to guess and check, and sometimes guessing and checking is nice because you can use it to see if your answer was right. NP2, remember that this meant, as far as the fundamental counting principle, that number was the number of spaces, and this is the number you start with. So the question is, with guessing and checking, if you had 2 spaces equal to 56, what 2 numbers multiply to give you 56 that are 1 apart? Is it hard to figure out that it had to be 8 times 7? And then you would know that n would have to be 8 from guessing and checking. So there will be some questions where the question will say you have to do it algebraically. It's not wrong that you do the guess and check first off to the side so you know the answer. Oh, n has to be 8. Pretty easy to see from the spaces technique. But you'd have to show all your work algebraically with the formula and with simplifying the factorials. Some questions will just say, if it just says solve. So, for example, part B. Part B is 5PR equals 20. If it doesn't say to solve it algebraically, you're able to use whichever technique you'd like. You have to start with a 5. Is one space enough? No. Is 5 equal to 20? No. Is 2 spaces enough? Yes. 5 times 4 is 20. So R is equal to 2. Circle question number 10.